Hi, I'm Chris Wilson, and welcome to the Unshakable Man community. This is a talk that I've given over 50 times, from high school students at a program called Uncollege. It's a guided gap year program for 18 and 19-year-old students who weren't going to college, to software sales executives and startups, to men in men's circles and men's retreats, even a few women's circles. And this is probably the talk. This is the talk that I wish that I had had early on in my 20s and when I was in college or when I was in high school. I actually didn't go to college. I went to 1 year of college and then left. And this probably would have helped me back then. And so I want to share this talk with you. I've come to call this the awakening of the unshakable man. But before I do that, I'm going to light some Palo Santo here, and I'm going to drink a sip of this tea. And I'm going to do this in order to bring myself down, to bring myself out of my head and egoic problems and challenges and where I'm at right now and into my body. It's a way of savoring and connecting. And I invite you to do the same with me right now, to just start to arrive here in the space and to recognize when you do that, that you have the ability to be somewhere else. You can actually be in the past or the future, and you have your own intuitive way of coming into be here right now. And so here we go. It's good to be here with you. So, the awakening of the unshakable man. I don't know what you are feeling, and you don't know what I am feeling. You are the only person, the only human being in this entire world that can report on your human experience. You are the only person in the world that can be trained to report on your human experience. If you're not good at it, if you're unable to let someone else know what you are feeling, it's not that you're bad at it. It's that you've simply been poorly trained. The doorbell's ringing. It's probably somebody trying to bring the mail. So we're just going to let that go. But I don't know what you're feeling, and you don't know what I'm feeling. You are the only person that can report on your experience. And if you don't know how, it's simply that you've been poorly trained. That's the first thing to recognize. So few of us in this world have ever been told that. And I just want you to notice what that means. You are the only person in the world that can report on your experience. There's no test, there's no study, there's no scientist, no guru. No one can tell you what you are feeling. You are the only person who can report on your experience. I am the only person who can report on my experience. And we learn how to do this in relationship with other human beings. And this is the next thing to notice, is that you survived to get here. You survived. You survived to get here today to where you and I could be engaging like this. Even if you're watching this later, you are engaging with the image of me sharing this with you. And you survived to get here. Doesn't necessarily mean you thrived, but you survived. And along the way, your nervous system, yes, your nervous system, I want you to touch your body, your nervous system was scanning the environment, looking for threat or connection, constantly, like an on-off switch. Is this threatening, or can I connect to this? Okay, so as a little boy, you were constantly in a state of looking for threat or connection. If you thought, another way to look at this is the choice between authenticity or attachment. If we thought that by some way, if we were authentic, we would not be able to remain attached to our parents, we would choose being inauthentic in order to stay attached. Because to not stay attached meant death. And so we survived to get here to this moment where we could realize this, that we have protective parts that have managed our existence, that have helped us survive to get here to where you and I could be learning this. And now who am I? So this is the next thing to recognize. First, right? It's that you are the only person who can report on your experience. And if you're not trained, you're simply not trained. Then it's recognizing that you survived to get here. And along the way, you cultivated protective parts of yourself. Protective parts, a mask, an identity, right? A shield. And this has constructive and destructive consequences to it. It is not bad or good. It's managerial. It's helped you fit in. It's helped you get to this place, but it's not you. It's what you experience your life through. And so this brings me to the third part, which is, who am I? We identify with these parts of ourselves. I identified as a young man, as an athlete. I identified as someone who wasn't good at going to school. I identified as someone who couldn't sit still. I identified in these ways. How did you identify? Now, this has constructive and destructive consequences to it. It's not all of us. And this is the myth of monolithic personality versus the multiplicity of self concept. When I say I am someone, I am Chris Wilson, right? I am a fiance. I am a men's coach. In one way, it helps me feel safe. It helps me fit in. It helps me identify with this whole image and story of who I think I am. But on the other, it makes me so small, so incredibly small, because I am so much more than those things. And yet, we say it all the time. I am blank. So who am I? And this is the fourth piece. Who am I? How do we even begin to work with this? So who we are is we are that which is experiencing. I am experiencing my life through these parts, through these places inside that have not been given a voice, or through those managerial parts that mask. I have a self-concept. I have self-esteem. I can be self-conscious. That is all this protective managerial mask that I wear. And then the last piece to this, is that I identify and have been socialized as male. And that can be a really big one, especially in today's ecosystem, where we're talking about this at a social and political level. But I really do. I identify and have been socialized as male, and that comes with an entire box, an entire thing of what it means to be a man. And we can call that the man box. And so I have a whole exercise, a whole workshop on discovering the man box. But what I want you to do right now is to just recognize, what are the qualifiers? What are the identifiers of what it means to be a man? Not necessarily that you agree with, but that you have indirectly and directly picked up by existing as a human being, no matter how you identify. I'll go ahead and just give you a couple of minutes to think about those for yourself. You could even write down 5. Go ahead and just write down 5 of them. And let's see if we say the same things. Okay, you can pause this if you want, but I'm going to start saying them now. I'm going to say tough. I'm going to say athletic. I'm going to say aggressive. I'm going to say intelligent, but not too intelligent. I'm going to say sex-seeking, not gay. I don't agree with it, but that's the message that I got as a young man. I'm going to say, doesn't feel, he's stoic. Oh, that's such a big one. There's so many guys out there who identify with this rigid, closed-off way of pushing through the world, right? I'm going to say warrior, but not the integrated warrior that we're teaching you how to be here at the Unshakable Man, but this image of this aggressive person that pushes through and is creating structure in the world, but it's all from a place of anxiety. It's a place from trying to conquer the world. Okay? Maybe that's enough. But that box is controlled by one primary emotion, and that emotion is shame. Shame is the emotion that says, if I told you what was happening on the inside, or if I told you what I did, I would not be allowed in the tribe. And so shame has been adaptive and constructive in the sense that it helps us stay in the tribe. It helps us stay in a small group, and it helps us stick to behaviors that keep us together when we were in small tribes. But now it's self-inflicted. Now that we don't necessarily need to be in those small tribes, we inflict it on ourselves or each other as a weapon of control to keep men in this box. And yet, we are so much more than what is in that rigidly defined man box. It's called the hegemonic culture of manhood. The culture of manhood in whatever category or whatever group or area that you look at. So there's a hegemonic manhood for whatever city you're in, or whatever country you're in, or whatever area of the internet you're in, right? Now, that is very rigidly defined. And it does another thing. It disconnects us from our bodies and from each other. So now, how are we left to be? If you are the only person who can report on your experience, but you identify or have been socialized as male, but now you aren't allowed to open. You're not allowed to be vulnerable and authentic with what's happening on or in your body. Now you're left to put up this mask, to pretend, to fuel this thing up in order to be a man, in order to fit in. While underneath the surface, there's all of this stuff going on, this entire experience of your life. That is what it means to awaken your unshakable man, to realize these things, to realize that there are these other parts of yourself, and that you are responsible for becoming the primary caretaker for those parts of you that need your care and attention. The stress, the trauma, the anxiety that is all felt on or in your body. And this brings me back to the beginning of, you are the only person who can report on your experience. What is an emotion? And this is the last piece. What is an emotion? Go ahead and see if you can think about what an emotion is for yourself in your own mind. What is your own working definition of an emotion? The definition of an emotion that I use here in The Unshakable Man comes from Dr. Eve Ekman, who did a 10-year research study with the Dalai Lama on what do emotions researchers agree on. And they couldn't even agree on what an emotion is because we don't know where an emotion originates. But the best definition that they could come up with, that the majority of them could agree on, is this. It's that an emotion is a physical sensation that's happening on or in your body. So touch your body, right? Remember the nervous system. It's on or in your body. It's a physical sensation that's happening on or in your body. That the mind, not your brain, your mind, notice how I'm not touching my head because the mind is everywhere. The mind is consciously or subconsciously aware of. So you might not even be aware of it. It's happening underneath your conscious awareness that's sending a message to your brain that something important is happening to your body's well-being. Okay, so an emotion is a physical sensation that's happening on or in your body that's sending a message to your brain that your mind is consciously or subconsciously aware of that something important is happening to the body's well-being. An emotion is a physical sensation. It starts as a sensation. It then becomes an emotion. Then you have a feeling about it, which is your label of the emotional experience with the language that you have available to you. So if you've been cut off from being able to share what you are feeling on or in your body, your language to relate from your brain down to your body is stunted, then your emotional experience, your emotional awareness, your emotional spectrum is stunted. And so you might say, I feel angry, or I feel stressed, or I feel confused, or I feel numb, because you actually do, because you have not been trained, because the communities and the people around you have told you that to be a man, you have to disconnect from this experience, and you have not been able to be open or vulnerable and to be trained. And so you have a reduced emotional vocabulary and your ability to actually come into your body, to get out of your head and into your heart and into your body. That path inward is the longest trip that any men in this world can take. But it is the path of the awakening of the unshakable man. And so, the emotion is a physical sensation that's happening on or in your body. And the culture of manhood has told us to harden, to push through. And it's adaptive, right? Because we survived. We needed to be this way in order to survive. But now we have this choice about thriving. How do we become whole? How do we experience more of our lives? How do we find safety within our own bodies so that we can bring that sense of safety out into the world and our relationships? How do we work through anxiety and stress and trauma and fear and doubt and addiction? All of these things that are happening on or in our bodies that rob us of our energy and awareness so that we can bring our gifts out into the world. All of this is your responsibility, but it is not your fault. And we do this work in community through co-regulation from 2 men, 3 men, 4 men, 8 men, 12 men, slowing down in a group and learning how to create a brave space where any and all emotions can be present, and learning how to take responsibility for what's happening on or in our bodies and to relate that experience to another human being. We witness, we open, and we guide. And in that process, we discover our own path towards our own wisdom and healing. And in doing so, we become more capable of being able to be with the experience of our life as it is, without trying to close it off and suppress it or repress it or deny it, and without trying to fix what's happening in the environment around us. We become much more intuitive and much more capable, much more patient, having much more purpose and power and presence. And so the final piece to all of this is that our true selves are always calm and compassionate and caring. They're courageous and creative. And yet so many of us, because of our survival, our path to get to where we are today, we have experienced our lives through these protective parts, through this identity or this mask. We haven't had opportunities, co-regulating opportunities to get out of that, our heads and egoic problems and challenges. So our actual physical experience of our life is brittle and rigid and filled with anxiety and shame and doubt and fear and insecurity, and we're pouring caffeine and Adderall and drugs on top of it in order to try to feel good, as good. We're trying our best, right? But when we actually get into a group with a group of other men, when we actually discover breath work, when we learn how to come into our bodies with somatic meditation, when we learn these tools and these skills to get out of our heads and egoic problems and challenges and to get into our bodies, we automatically discover that it is an allowing process. We don't have to try so hard. That when we get out of that stuff and we fall down into the ground, we come into the body and we learn how to be with what's happening on or in our bodies, we discover that feeling, the quality of those experience is openness. It is wholesome. It's coming from within. It's coming from the ground, from our bodies, up our backbone, up through our heart, out of our hands, up through our eyes and our face into the experience of our life. And so when we answer the call, when we choose to show up in our lives and relationships, when we realize that we are the only ones who can do this work and that we have survived to get here, and along the way we have developed protective parts of ourselves that are like corrosive barriers that block our energy and awareness from going out into the world, we realize that we have to answer the call to show up in a more empowering way in our lives and relationships, and that we are the only ones who can do it, but we can't do it alone. It's together alone. We have to do it in community with other men. We actually have to show up and train. We have to practice. And when we do that, we call it taking on your shadow and gold mission, or answering the call. And when you answer the call, you take radical responsibility for your lives and relationships. You realize that it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And that you have to go back to the places inside that need your care and attention. And that your life and your relationships are helping you find these places inside that need your care and attention. That when anxiety or stress or trauma or sensations come up on or in your body, they're happening in your body. And that's what we do here in the Unshakable Man. The 3 questions we ask most in Circle are, what are you feeling? We label it. Where do you feel it in your body? We go down. And what does it need? We discover that these parts of us, we have been looking for people on the outside, our jobs, our communities, our environment, our ideas, our fantasies, our aspirations, to help those parts feel better. But actually, from an embodied practice, it's our responsibility to help them feel better now. And once they learn to trust us, once they discover that we are there to take care of them the way that our parents didn't know how, because our parents weren't trained. Many of our parents were not trained. Many of our community members were not trained. They learn to soothe. And those protective parts start to fade. And then the sensations and the emotions and the feelings and the thoughts and the moods and the judgments and the stories and the belief systems that are attached to those parts, the way they see the world starts to fold, starts to come away. And you start to be able to see your life much more clearly. You become less reactive and more capable of responding to your environment. You become much more resilient and adaptable. and you realize that everything in your life is like your tour mentor. It's helping you find the places inside that need your care and attention, especially your intimate relationships. And then it's this generative cycle of learning to become more skillful and learning to be able to meet the world and the relationships as they are. And this entire process is life-giving. It is creative and energizing and enlivening. And you're realizing your wholeness, and you're realizing how to bring that out into the world. And this is the path of the unshakable man. This is the awakening of the unshakable man. And if this is your first time hearing any of this, I understand if it's confusing. I understand if this is a lot, because it is. But it all starts with that I don't know what you are feeling, and you don't know what I'm feeling. You are the only person who can report on your experience. And if you don't know how, it just means you've been poorly trained. And you can begin to learn how by coming in and joining a group like ours, like the Unshakable Man, where we practice together and we create these brave spaces. And so the last piece that I want to add in here is something called neuroception, okay? This is the word that's used for the radar system. It's like the system, the part of your nervous system that scans out into the world around you and inside your body, looking for threat and connection. And what neuroception does is it scans your environment below your conscious awareness, right? Remember how I said sensations lead to emotions, and emotions are sensations that you've identified with in some way, because the brain is saying that this sensation says that something important is happening to the body's well-being. Well, maybe something hurt you early on, and you did something to survive that experience. Well, your brain remembers the way it needs to show up, the automatic action that needs to occur, not based on all of the information that's out there, but on how a situation is making you feel, so that it can save energy and respond more quickly, unconsciously, just directly, automatically responding to the world. And that is non-conscious. It's autonomic. That's where the autonomic nervous system comes from. And so your nervous system is scanning the environment below your conscious awareness through neuroception. And neuroception leads to perception. So we perceive our environment. We're perceiving it all around. We don't actually experience the world as it is. We experience the world as our nervous system sees it. And then what happens is neuroception leads to sensation, and then emotion, and then behavior change, and then a behavior, and then an action, and then a story, and then a belief system. It's how we see the world. Our physiological state of our body leads to a psychological understanding. It goes bottom up, not just top down. 80% of the signals go from the nervous system up to the brain, and only 20% of the signals go from the brain down to the body. So if you are trying to think positive thoughts, if you are trying to use all this intellectual information to somehow shift how you experience your life, it will only work 20% of the time to go top down. It works as a really great limiter. But the story in your head will follow the state of your body. And so that is how the culture of manhood has disconnected us from our bodies. We over-identify with the intellect. We don't know how to get into our bodies because we haven't been training around with other men who know how to do it too. Men like me. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I mean that from a fellow human being who has also answered the call to show up in my life and to find my own inner unshakable man, the part of me that can learn to father and to take care of the places inside that need my energy and attention, so that I can be my own primary caretaker, and I can learn to unleash my energy and awareness out into the world in my outer purpose, in service of everyone and everything. And that gentleman, That is the awakening of the unshakable man. So if you enjoyed this talk, I've given this talk so many times, it's not scripted, it just comes from my heart. And it's really the information that I wish I had when I was in when I was 16 or 17 or 18 or 19 or 20. But now I'm 39 years old. I've been on this path for 10 years, creating spaces where men can practice tools and skills to slow down and to get out of our heads and egoic problems and challenges and to learn to get into our bodies. And I know this in my gut, not in my head. I know it from direct experience that this is the work that will save us and save the world, because it connects us to our bodies. It shows us that we are natural parts of the ecosystem, and it gets us out of our heads and these judgments and how we see the world. We heal. We learn how to heal, and we learn how to take away these corrosive parts of ourselves that are blocking us from showing up fully in our lives and relationships, and allows us to connect to everyone and everything. And when we learn that, as people who identify as male, as men, we then have the ability to connect to others, to create more spaces for others to learn how to do the same, to protect those spaces, but not rigidly, to protect them from a place of tenderness and fierceness, from deep empathy of what it means to create a brave space. That's not a safe space. That's not a space where we're using these tools and skills to create walls. That is a space that's elastic, that can expand and contract to be with what anyone brings into the space, because we know we have done our work. We know that this is happening on or in our bodies, and we can expand to be with it. And yet, in the profundity of our experience, there are so many people out there, and hurt people hurt people. And that's why we need men to stand up and to answer the call of the Unshakable Man and to do this work. Whether you join the Unshakable Man community or you find another men's circle, this is the work that will heal the world. And that's it. I'm Chris Wilson. Welcome to the Unshakable Man community. I hope that you found some parts of this inspiring. I hope it awakened your own Unshakable Man and inspired some sense of curiosity to explore and join us. If you have any questions, I would love to hear from you down in the bottom. Anything that inspired you, like what from this talk lit you up? What made you curious to go further? What made you feel tight on or in your body and triggered a judgment or an idea that maybe you feel like you want to talk more about? That is what this place is here for. We are here to create spaces where men can practice tools and skills together, and we can all learn how to show up in our lives and relationships in more empowering ways. So congratulations to you for being here and looking and how to work on yourself. And thank you for doing this work. I can't wait to see you inside. Have a great day.